Welcome to this second video on the theme Seeing Things We Can't See with Sound We Can't Hear. I'm Brian Hoyle, Professor of Electronic Sensing and Instrumentation at Leeds. If you didn't listen to the first talk, it may be useful to view that first. In our first talk, we saw our Ultracane for blind people in action with a blind person navigating a busy pavement. It was continuously measuring distance to objects around, both ahead for navigation and for safety above as well. How was it passing this information to the brain of the human user? Before answering this question, I'm going to carry out an experiment. I'm a sighted person, but I'm about to render myself sightless and blind and pretty hopeless as a sighted person trying to operate in the darkness. So I now cannot see, and I'm going to try a little exercise. And I'm firstly going to try to confuse my brain with the position of my finger. And I've now done that a little while, and so I'm thinking my brain can't possibly know where my finger is pointing, and I'm going to point to my nose. And as you can see, I was able to do that without any serious problems. So it's obvious that even if I have no sight, my parts of my body can still be controlled by my brain, and I can do that without sight. So it's obvious then the brain has some means, some sense of knowing where some of the parts of my body are orienting when I move them around. So I'm not blind, except in the dark, but perhaps if I take a torch and it is dark, I can use that torch and point around. And we've just seen that my brain all the time knows where my arm is, it knows the angle of my wrist, etc. So if I'm using this torch to look around, or anything, any information that's linked to where my arm is, my brain is going to quickly learn how to integrate that information with the other information, like the scene that my eyes, as a sighted person, are seeing in the torch beam. Now, the human brain, my brain, your brain, is an amazing learning machine. And so if I do this quite often, I'm going to learn to do this without thinking. Rather like a concert pianist, it takes a number of years, but after a while you're able to do this very, very complicated process without thinking. So let's think about integrating sensors, S-E-N-S-E-S, with sensors, S-C-N-S-O-R. Well, let's first think about our sensors, S-E-N-S-E-S. And here I've got a list of them, and I'm sure you recognise the first 5, although it's always difficult to remember them all, isn't it? So we've got sight, hearing, touch, taste and smell. I've got the sensor bit as well. We've got the eyes, the ears, the fingers, the mouth, the nose, etc. Now, we just picked up with my little introduction another sense, and I think you have this too. We all have this sense. It's got a rather long name. It's called proprioception. And this means that neuroreceptors in the movable bits of your body tell the brain all the time when those parts have moved. So proprioception is this other magic sense that we all have. Well, here's our Ultracane again. This time we can see on the handle 2 small buttons, and we call these tactors. It's just an abbreviation for tactile buttons, and the tactile buttons gives pulse signals giving the direction and distance of hazard in effect. So we're going to see that these are going to vibrate, and these are going to be the channel of information that our user links to his or her brain. Now, it's important to note that because we're using this tactile feedback, the hearing sense of the user isn't disturbed at all, and our brains operate in separate channels. And if we don't use the hearing channel for this purpose, then we can use it for the normal thing of listening for street sounds. If you're visually impaired and blind, you need your hearing to listen for that vital information and perhaps talk to your friend. And you can use the tactile information separately without the two interfering. Well, here we can see an arrangement with some nice arrows there linking the ultrasonic transducers to a particular button. So when the first green transducer is receiving an echo, it's then going to pass that on as a pulse train to the button at the front of the ultracane. And the button at the back of the ultracane then receives information about warnings about the head height obstruction. So this is what's going to happen, and normally we're feeling things at the front as we move along, and very occasionally, hope in time, we receive a signal at the back. Now you might think it may be difficult to resolve the difference between these two, but there's lots of nerve endings in the ball of our thumb. It's a very, very sensitive area of the body, and it's quite easy to distinguish between these two things. Well, here's an interesting diagram, and it shows information coming in to my brain if I'm the user, and I've got the tactile stimulus to think about. Remember, our new sense, the proprioception sense, is the orientation of the position of the cane handle. Now these two bits of information in a practiced user can be integrated together to create this idea of a spatial map. Now on top of that, if we're walking down a pathway that we've been on before, we've also got a prior memory of where this is Mrs. Jones's driveway, and here's the tree, and here's the post box, etc. So this idea of building information into the brain to link the brain is a fantastic processing machine. All we need to do is to feed it with data, and it's going to create information from that data. Well, one thing to think about, I gave this little analogy of somebody learning to play a piano. Very, very difficult skill to learn, but the ultracane only needs a little bit of skill. And here we've got the opinion of quite a number of users here. We've got selected 3 people here. Let's just pick out one in a moment. But the interesting point that they all report is, after a few days, they stop feeling vibrations, and they just know where they are. And this is because the brain, our fantastic computer learning machine in our head, has learned how to use this information to create the knowledge that we need. So let's take Miss Bradstreet. When using the ultracane, people think I'm faking being blind because I tell them where things are and go around them. There we go. So it's quite interesting to listen to what people say about using the ultracane. It's interesting talking about trying to provide information for helping blind people. What we really need, of course, is to put the ultracane and connect it directly into someone's brain. Unfortunately, this is rather a risky procedure. But what we can do to look at the possibilities is look at the fairly new science called biomimetics, the idea of imitating or mimicking nature. It's a science of learning from nature. Perhaps it's more interesting. If we think about bats, that we all know a little bit about, they don't need any light to see. They usually fly around at night and hunt insects, as we can see here. They don't need any light. They do have eyes, but they can do their work entirely in the dark. And they verbalize using their mouth to create ultrasound, and they process echoes directly into a special part of their brain, which presumably, we don't know, we can't ask them, which presumably synthesizes a view of the dark world that they're working in. So bats offer amazing inspiration to what is possible with ultrasound. Well, we've met lots of interesting people on the ultracane project, and one of the people we met is Richard Hammond, the TV presenter, who, as shown here, was filming for a TV series called Biomimetics, Miracles of Nature. And as you can see, the link with bats here. So he wanted to try out the ultracane, which we did do, and he also asked, because of his links with motor cars and fast cars, etc., if he could fit an ultracane to a car so a blind person could drive the car. Well, let's take a little look at Richard and I learning how to use the ultracane.
This isn't just a bit like the way about works. This is echolocating.
It's very, very similar indeed.
Okay.
Over to you.
Right, so It's beeping at me. That was you.
It was me.
It's found
yes,
you.
You felt me.
Look at
yes,
that. And if I
here.
move it
Yeah.
off, it stops.
I'm going to go behind you so I can see what's going on.
I felt you walk through. So what I'm doing now is, this is sending out a noise, the same as a bat does, and then listening for it bouncing back, echoing back off objects, which is exactly what our bats did. It then tells me by buzzing on this, and you can feel it in my thumb. So if I walk towards that, it's found something.
Just take it slowly.
It's buzzing through my thumb.
Ah, good.
But if I move off, it's not.
Great.
So it's telling me there's an object
so
to my
you
left.
found a safe path to the right.
And there's nothing to my right. Nothing. Oh! There's a sudden buzz at my... Now, if I move off to the right, nothing. To the left, something. To the right, nothing. So I would know I'm OK going this way. And it gets faster as you get closer to it. It buzzes through your thumb more quickly.
That's great. Absolutely.
Well, you don't need me to tell you, Brian, that your invention works, because it does.
Fantastic. Great.
Bring on the blindfold. Let's give this a proper go. Right. Let's see if I can pick up in a matter of minutes what it's taken the fruit bat millions of years to perfect. Nothing. Oh, something to my right. Hang on, there's a gap there. I've got something to my left there and to my right there. Picked up something then. Oh, that's a mannequin, isn't it? Slowly but surely, I can see how somebody could build up a picture. Right, only thing is, I've no idea where I've ended up. Right, I had no idea that I was here.
Well, I think you did really well, and I don't think you bumped into anything.
I didn't hit anything.
Well, I hope you enjoyed Richard and I trying to work out how to use the Ultracane as novice users. The key point is, of course, as we've been discussing, is a little practice brings perfection, and it brings the capability to use the Ultracane and let the information go to your brain without having to pass through the conscious mind. So look out for part 3, when we're going to look at even more interesting things. We're going to start to see how we can help users to ride a bike.